Joining me now, Jim Pfaff, president of the Conservative Caucus, the debate between Kamala Harris, the vice president of the Biden-Harris administration, no matter how much they try to separate themselves, and Donald Trump, the former president. So let's dive right in. Jim, great to have you here. Debate strategy, what to expect tomorrow night. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think one of the interesting aspects of this debate, although there's a lot more substance than this to talk about, is the fact that this debate was set up with when Joe Biden was still running and not undemocratically replaced by Harris. And then Kamala Harris wanted to change the terms of the debate so they could have open mics and she could try to Mike Pence him, so to speak, not like she could ever do that. And now they're going to have closed mics again. Frankly, Donald Trump was pretty fantastic in that last interview. I mean, Biden bombed, but Trump was also excellent. I think it just feeds perfectly into a very substantive opportunity for Donald Trump to make a comparison with Harris. And I think it puts her in a difficult position, because she's just not smart on policy. And when you can wing it a little bit, sometimes if you're struggling, you can rise yourself up to the occasion. She's not capable of doing that, I think, in this format. At least that's my initial read.
All right, so let's talk about how Trump wins the debate from your perspective tomorrow. And I want to put a little context into this when I say win. The base is there for both candidates, to be fair. So the focus and the goal, a large focus and goal of the debate, is to reach those undecided or otherwise voters. We'll put them under the otherwise umbrella. Fact versus Harris fiction is on the table. Comparisons between 4 years of Trump and almost 4 years of Biden-Harris is evident for all. So what do you think he needs to do?
Well, I think the economy is the main issue that can drive him to a very comfortable win, potentially, on November 5th. Listen, they keep talking about in the Biden-Harris administration, the Harris-Biden administration, I like to say, about, inflation's coming down. When you look at the actual numbers, it's down from about a 30% plus peak to about 20% greater than it was under Trump. Donald Trump, if you look at the graph too, Donald Trump's inflation situation was very stable over 4 years. Why? Because his policies were better. Because they had the tax cut that came in. More importantly, though, because he was cutting regulation throughout his presidency. Listen, it's interesting. The Reagan movie's out right now because Ronald Reagan did the same thing. There's no doubt that Paul Volcker fixing the money, Ronald Reagan cutting taxes, those were both very important aspects of the Reagan economic recovery. But I'm convinced, and I think the numbers bear it out, that the most important thing he did was cut regulation. And that because people don't remember this, the Grace report came out it's interesting that Elon may be heading up a commission under the Trump administration to look at how government is run. Well, the Grace Commission report did that very thing, and Ronald Reagan made an aggressive attempt to cut federal regulations, and I believe that was also a massive, maybe the most significant factor that caused the Reagan economy to do so well, so that by 1984, he was saying, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? That very message is what Donald Trump can say, obviously pointing to the opposite situation that can help him get in. So I think if he can focus on these messages, stay on topic right there, while throwing in the border, it's a winning message. And I think that's how he can potentially win this thing. And again, win, you are right. I mean, he's got the base. But I think he can convince those independent voters that may still be deciding.
One of the things that I want to see removed from this debate, again, to reach those people, is the personal attacks. Okay, I get it, a name here and there may be clever, but focus on policy, right? It's about winning that uncommitted voter in whatever form, that otherwise voter, but also to personalize elements of the debate. For example, if you say, look at how Americans are struggling under the weight, the effects of illegal alien crime. It's kind of broad, not inaccurate, but a bit innocuous. But if you point to the fact that, Kamala Harris, what would you say to Laken Riley's and Jocelyn Nungari's family? Quick description, raped and murdered, just to the point, to bring in a name that that voter can say, okay, who is that? Maybe I don't know. Personalizing and connecting with someone, at least to pique their interest. What do you say to that strategy?
So you need, and Republicans have been really horrible at this for a lot of years. You need to tell the stories, and it's not just the Laken Riley story, which obviously you want to repeat and bring up, but we have plenty of stories taking place here recently. You've got Venezuelan gangs taking over Aurora, Colorado, and you've got a shootout, or a close down, I guess I should say, with some gunfire on the Bay Bridge. I'm not the Bay Bridge, but the Bay Bridge in San Francisco. This is what's happening. This is the direct result of Harris-Biden border policy. Kamala Harris may try to say she wasn't the border czar. She was. She's totally neglected anything that mattered. In fact, I don't think it's entirely neglect. I think this is the outcome that they wanted. Listen, the only way Democrats can win is to change up the rules or to create chaos. They cannot win on policy. But I still contend that the immigration issue is going to need to be discussed, but the economy is the main message. When you look at all the polls, 40+% of Americans are concerned about the economy as their number one issue, and then somewhere in the teens, up to 20% maybe, is immigration. And that's a passionate issue. It's a visceral issue that people can feel, and so I want him to tell those stories. But tell the story of the economy. The mother sitting at her table with her husband all the time, or pulling up their bank account online and looking at where things are going. The rise, the reduction in personal savings, and the massive rise in credit card debt. These are the issues, and amongst others, that really make the case and can put this into a nice, neat, ribbon up, package that people can take with them to the polls and say, yeah, I think I want to give Donald Trump another try.
My guest, Jim Pfaff, president of the Conservative Caucus, building coalitions. And that's how we win. A lot of what needs to happen with the outreach is also that we need to build more coalitions and grow the big tent in the Republican Party. That's been the hue and cry, but often not as effective because of people focusing on their differences rather than, to cite what's been attributed to Reagan since 1973, my 80% friend is not my 20% enemy. And speaking of visceral reactions, one of the points of attack that Kamala Harris will use is the issue of abortion and how it's being approached and how it varies in Republican-run states. So how does Trump counter, in your opinion, that, while at the same time, to our conservative friends, if you will, or to the coalition, we have to focus on where we're aligned?
Well, just to be very clear, for me personally, I'm pro-life. I do not even want exceptions. If we went back to rape, incest, and life of the mother, we'd be down to less than 5% of all abortions presently occurring if it were restricted there. Donald Trump has taken a different tack, and it's not a wrong one. And frankly, as a pro-lifer, I think people need to be really happy about the situation that we're in. He defeated Roe v. Wade because he did what everyone asked him to: focus on getting Supreme Court nominees that will get rid of Roe v. Wade. We have been ruled by the U.S. Supreme Court for almost 60 years that we had to allow abortions under any circumstance. Now that debate is back into the states. Frankly, the pro-life crowd that might be negative on Donald Trump are really sucking at getting things done state by state. They really fail. I know I've put my fingers into some of this trying to help these people out. They don't want the help. They just do their own thing, and they failed, not because pro-aborts were so strong, but because they were very weak and unfocused. Donald Trump, I think, sits back and says, listen, I got to speak to the pro-lifers. I got Roe v. Wade done, the message that he's giving right now. And I've sent it back to the states. And now you can decide. That message is actually working. Although it's a little touchy for pro-lifers, it is working overall because Kamala Harris and Democrats, they want to make this entire election about abortion because they feel that's what won it for them in 2020. I think it had some effect, but I could go into a long argument as to why I don't think that's what won it, but it had some effect. But they can't win on that issue anyway. And what Donald Trump's message is neutralizing that. He just needs to keep repeating what he's talking about. He did the work that us pro-lifers wanted him to do, asked him to do. He got it done. We should be thankful for that. But if she tries to bring up abortion, like Donald Trump wants to make massive restrictions, he's already answered that question. That's not what I'm pushing for. I'm leaving that to the states to decide. That is, she'll make the argument. She'll get really, incensed about it. But the fact is that her argument doesn't win that debate. Donald Trump's does.
My guest, Jim Pfaff, president of the Conservative Caucus, fighting for conservative values. Governance is the issue for many Americans. How is the country going to be governed? What's our direction? And it is I think, diametrically opposed, maybe too weak a term about the two visions that those candidates have. What else do you think the former president, Donald Trump, can do to put forth his vision and what really is the American vision?
I think the biggest thing that he can point to, because the American vision is the American dream and individual freedom. Those are the messages that have carried this country to great success moving forward. But so he needs to keep repeating that, and that he is the best person to do that. And he's got all the arguments to make that case. There's one other issue that I think is critical that Americans are very concerned about. The only Americans not concerned about it are the most radical, leftist, progressive, socialist communists. And that is the issue of free speech. We just saw a demonstration in Brazil over this past weekend where there's a country aggressively through court action shutting down a major platform, X. They shut down Elon's X platform, and they've shut down free speech. They're intimidating their citizens through court action that actually violates their constitution. The people on the left around the country, including Kamala Harris and everyone in the Democrat Party who are already seeking to take away free speech, they will finish the job if Kamala Harris is allowed to become president. That is a key issue, and they're watching what's happening to Brazil to see if that effort can win. They're watching what's happening as well in Europe, particularly England right now, where people are getting thrown in jail for free speech. That's a big issue. I think he needs to point out that the Twitter files and Missouri v. Biden case, which brought out many of the same kinds of documents with Facebook, show that the Biden administration was seeking to take down free speech, shut down people's accounts, just like they're doing in Brazil. And they will expand that effort if she becomes president. They've set up systems within our own government to do that. That is a key issue I think you could talk about as well that will certainly cause a big brouhaha in this debate. And I think that's part of what we're voting for on November 5th, is whether we're going to continue our constitutional freedom or at least have a hope to restore it or not.
Yeah, and there's some hope of sanity even in the Ninth Circuit, which just gave Elon Musk a win, a partially blocked attempt at the state level of another disinformation board as they tried at the federal level under the Biden Harris, or as you put it, the Harris Biden administration. One and the same, both failures. Jim Pfaff, president of the Conservatives Caucus at theconservativecaucus.org. Thank you, Jim.
Thanks for having me.